Hi everyone, we are continuing Holes by Louis Sachar, covering chapters 28 through 35 in this video. So the last few chapters where we left off was where Stanley and Zero make this deal. Stanley going to teach Zero how to read in return for Zero helping dig Stanley's hole. And so we have these who are basically jealous and they begin to make fun of Stanley. And so Zigzag in particular pushes Stanley, and Mr. Pendanski sees this and encourages Stanley to fight back, which I hope real life counselors and teachers are not doing. But Stanley doesn't fight back, not too much. But instead, we have an interesting finding where Zero stands up for him and basically nearly kills Zigzag. And so eventually the warden comes around and breaks everything up, and Mr. Pendanski continues to act very childish. He continues to tell Zero that you will never amount for anything except for digging holes. And so this triggers and makes Zero very upset, and Zero ends up leaving the area, saying that he will no longer dig anymore and basically escapes. In this scenario, it's interesting and important to understand that the warden and Mr. Pendanski basically get rid of all the records that Zero ever existed, since he will leave off and basically disappear, right? Which is very sad, because in the real world, we would expect that if you pass away, you either have loved ones, you have people looking for you, right? And there would be issues that come up, but instead they get rid of every single record that he ever lived or even came to camp, okay? And so when Mr. Sir comes around to pour water for everyone the next day, Stanley makes this quick, irrational decision, and he basically jumps into Mr. Pendanski's truck and steals it in order to go save Zero to find him, right? And so the new guy named Twitch, the reason why he's at camp is because he used to steal cars. He actually helps Stanley and explains how he could start the car engine, but Stanley doesn't end up too far with the car, but will get out of the truck and continue to walk towards the Thumb Mountain until he finally reaches this boat named Mary Lou, and he was able to find Zero, who dug a hole under, using the shovel that Zero actually hit Mr. Pendanski with before escaping. And so they together drink this muddy-looking liquid called sploosh, and Zero clearly does not look good. I would hope everyone understands how important water is. And so without clear water, Zero doesn't look good, but he refuses to go back to camp, which for a moment, Stanley tried to convince him to go back to. So this is where we leave off at chapter 35. So let's go ahead and move on to some of our vocabulary words, beginning with number 1. The peach trees had all died, but there were a couple of small oak trees growing by an old abandoned cabin. So the word abandoned means unoccupied or deserted, okay? So if there's, for example, an abandoned child, that means the child is left unattended. There is no parent around, right? So similar to that, there may be houses that are abandoned that can turn into like haunted houses, for example. If there's houses where there's no one, then no one has lived there for hundreds of years. Number 2, it has to rain soon. The drought can't last forever. And so drought means a prolonged lack of rain. So in other words, it means for a long period you don't have rain. And droughts are very critical for the United States. It's very important that we do get rain because we have many states who grow important crops for us to have food. And so when there's a long drought, farmers have a tough time because there's not enough rain that is supplying these crops to grow, since crops always need water in order to grow. Number 3, the humidity or maybe the electricity in the air had made Zigzag's head even more wild looking. So humidity is a moderate wetness of the atmosphere. So this might seem a little confusing, but some people will go outside and say it's very, very hot. Yes, it could be hot, but you also have to know the difference between something very hot and something very humid. Humidity is often associated with how sticky you might feel, while heat is usually related to how hot and could also make your skin dry. And so the humidity level might change how it feels. It might be 90 degrees outside and still not feel so hot. And while on the other hand, it might be like 70, 80 degrees outside and it feels super, super hot because it is humid. Okay. Number 4, no one ever knew what he meant by that. He was delirious when he said it. And the word delirious means mentally disturbed and confused, often as a result of high fever. So many people will use this word casually. You're being so delirious, like you're acting crazy. You're not really speaking out of a normal mindset, right? And so when he was delirious when he said it, it means like he was just crazy when he said it. He wasn't in his normal state of mind. Okay, delirious. Number 5, I found refuge on God's thumb. And the word refuge means shelter or protection from danger. So sometimes there are wars going on and there's refugees. And refugee with the additional E at the end means the people who need help from them. So basically, it might be through boat, it might be through flight, but the United States participates in helping a lot of refugees get out of there and find shelter and have basic necessities such as food to eat so that they feel safer in the United States. Number 6, Stanley jerked back against the seat and tightly gripped the wheel as the truck accelerated. His foot was pressed to the floor. And accelerated means gained speed or to go faster and faster. So in a car, when you press on the accelerator, that's what causes you to go faster and faster, okay? And the opposite of that would be braking. Another way that acceleration can be used is even in like school. Some people might be super smart. They skip a grade. They may be in a quicker acceleration in their academic track than other people, right? So it can not only, it might not just be physically, but it could also be used in different contexts as well. Number 7, he lay on the dirt staring at the truck, which stuck lopsided into the ground. So lopsided means leaning to one side or asymmetrical. And so asymmetrical means not symmetrical. And symmetrical means like the left side and the right side are equal to each other, meaning that asymmetrical means that they're not equal to each other. So something is leaning to one side. So I like to think of a seesaw as the best example because it's usually never very, very equal unless you have the exact same weight on the left and right side. Usually be lopsided to one side, always because one weight is bigger than the other. It's not usually two people with the exact same weight riding the seesaw. All right, number 8. There wasn't any water. It was a mirage caused by the shimmering waves of heat rising off the dry ground. And mirage means something seen that does not exist. So another example of a mirage would be like an optical illusion. So it seems like you see something, but it actually doesn't exist. So it looks like sometimes when you see heat waves, for example, it may look like there's water, right? But in this case, it was just the heat rising off the dry ground. There wasn't really water that was on the ground. Okay. Number 9. Someone may have drowned here, he thought grimly, at the same spot where he could very well die of thirst. So grimly means seriously. So when he thought this grimly, he was serious about, oh, someone may have died here, and I may be the next person too, right? And so a grim when you're thinking grimly or saying something grimly, it's usually very depressing. So for example, you might be curious about how someone is doing at the hospital, and if the doctor replies or talks to you grimly, usually that means you probably have little to no hope about what's going on in that situation. So it's used in a very serious context. Number 10, there were enough cracks and holes in the bottom of the boat, now the roof, to provide light and ventilation. So ventilation means the circulation of air. So for example, if a room has no windows, it probably lacks ventilation. There's not enough ventilation in that room. And if there's a room that has many windows and you're always opening it, you might always get that circle of air coming in and have that ventilation, which is good for you to have fresh air constantly coming into the house. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the multiple choice questions. Number 1, why did Kate Barlow return to Green Lake after 20 years? A, she wanted to visit Sam's grave. B, because the town was gone, she figured she could hide out there. C, she wanted to make more of her spiced peaches from her special trees. B, because the town was gone, she figured she could hide out there. Number 2, where had Kate met Linda Miller before? A, Linda was in Kate's class when Linda was in the 4th grade. B. Linda met Kate while Kate was on the road as an outlaw. C. Linda was in the mob that burned down the schoolhouse. A. Linda was in Kate's class when Linda was in the 4th grade. Linda was a student of Kate, right? Number 3. How did Kate Barlow die? A. Trout Walker shot her. B. She was bitten by a lizard. Or C. She died in jail. B. She was bitten by a lizard. 4. Why is Mr. Pendanski partially responsible for the fight between Zigzag and Stanley? A. He encourages Stanley to hit Zigzag. B. He asks Zero who started the argument, and Zero tells him Zigzag did. C. He threatens not to give Stanley any water unless he whips Zigzag. And A's answer, he encourages Stanley to hit Zigzag and says that you need to fight back and stand up for yourself. Number 5, what does the warden say when she learns that Zero has been helping Stanley dig? A. Zero will have to dig an extra hole each day. B. No more digging anybody's hole and no more lessons. C. Stanley will have to help Zero dig his holes. The answer is B. Warden stops not only the fight, but says no more digging for other people and no more lessons for each other. Number 6, how does the warden plan to punish Zero for running away? A. She will make him dig extra holes. B. She will not allow him to use the rec room for a month. Or C. She will not let him drink water and will scratch him with her nails. C. She will not let him drink water and will scratch him with her nails. Warden and Mr. Pendanski assume that Zero will come back as soon as he needs water, which so far has not happened yet. Number 7, why does the warden want Zero's files erased? A. To avoid trouble with the AG's office. B. To keep Zero's parents from learning what happened to him and why. Or C. To frighten the others into behaving. And the answer is A. The warden makes sure to explain to Mr. Pendanski in their conversation that she doesn't want to have any issues of the AG trying to look for Zero, whether he existed or not. So she wants him to get rid of all the files that ever existed about Zero and his existence. Number 8, what reason does Stanley have for stealing Mr. Sir's truck? A. He has always wanted to learn to drive, but has never had the chance before. B. It will teach Mr. Sir a lesson for being so mean to the boys. Or C. He can cover more ground searching for Zero. The answer is C. To cover more ground. He felt that taking the truck would be much quicker than obviously being on foot instead to look for Zero, although it backfired and he didn't get too far with the truck. Number 9, why does Stanley decide to walk across the desert toward the mountain? A. It is the only landmark in the desert. B. His great-grandfather may have taken refuge there. Or C. He thinks Zero is hiding there. The answer is B. His great-grandfather may have taken refuge there. So he realizes as he's walking in the desert looking for Zero originally, he remembers how his great-grandfather may have taken refuge at the thumb, which is also in our sentence for a vocabulary that we earlier covered today too. Number 10, where does Stanley find Zero? A, under a boat. B, on top of Big Thumb. C, in a depression in the desert. The answer is A, under a boat. Although they were continuously going towards the Big Thumb, Stanley did not reach the top of the Big Thumb yet to realize what there is to offer there. But instead, Zero is found under a boat in a hole, and the boat's name is Mary Lou. Okay, short response questions, beginning with number 1. What did Green Lake look like when Kate Barlow returned to it? So by the time Kate Barlow came back, it was basically a ghost town. No one was there. The peach trees had all died. The lake is basically non-existent. It's just a little dirty pond. And so there wasn't much to offer by the time Kate Barlow came back to Green Lake. Number 2, why did Linda guess that Kate had buried the money? So Linda actually sees that Kate had a shovel inside her cabin, and so Linda automatically assumed that the money was buried by her using that shovel. Number 3, how does Stanley know that Zero was smarter than anyone thinks? So Zero was able to be, although Zero was not good at reading yet, Zero was also very good at math. So he was good at mental math and math problems in his head. And so to Stanley, Stanley already knew Zero was very, very smart, although everyone else disagreed, even Mr. Pendanski making fun of Zero. Number 4, why does Zero hit Mr. Pendanski with a shovel? So Mr. Pendanski, acting childish, as we covered in the summary, continues to tell Zero, hey, you're not going to amount to anything. You're absolutely good for nothing. You're going to have to dig holes for the rest of your life. And Zero gets very upset over that and ends up striking Mr. Pendanski with the shovel. Number 5, why doesn't Stanley tell the warden where he found the lipstick tube? Obviously, Stanley is the one who found the lipstick tube, so he knows exactly where it was found. However, he basically gave the lipstick tube to X-Ray to make it seem as if X-Ray found it. So if Stanley were to tell the real location, he's just afraid that he would get in big trouble. And not only himself, but X-Ray as well for lying. Number 6, what had Twitch done to get sent to the Camp Green Lake? Again, Twitch plays an important role in helping Stanley not get caught in Mr. Pendanski's car, because basically Twitch teaches or yells at Stanley, telling him how to start the engine for the truck. And so Twitch is very used to this, because the reason why he's at this camp is because he was caught stealing cars. So he's very good at breaking in and maneuvering and working with cars. Number 7, why doesn't Stanley drive across the desert in the truck to find Zero? So that was his original plan, to take the truck and drive across the desert. Unfortunately, he accidentally drives the truck into a hole and ends up having to leave it there because it gets stuck and he can't get it out of the hole. Number 8, what scares Stanley in the desert and makes him run? So he ends up encountering a family of yellow-spotted lizards, and he's so scared that it's going to chase and basically bite him, and that would lead to his death. So he starts running in the other direction. Number 9, what food has Zero been living on in the desert? So once he's found by Stanley under the Mary Lou the boat, Zero is going to be living off the sploosh, which is the muddy, dirty water that Zero has been drinking and living off of. And they only have 1 jar left by the end of chapter 35 as well. Number 10, what does a mountain in the distance look like to Zero? So Zero describes it as a big thumb. And the reason it is the big thumb is because it's like a thumb that's sticking out from a fist. So that's why it's called the big thumb. And that's what it looks like to Zero as well. Okay, we're going to wrap up with a couple of discussion questions that I'm going to leave you guys to answer on your own. So number 1, why did Kate Barlow, while living in the cabin, think she was crazy? Number 2, Stanley has always blamed someone else for his bad luck. Now, Stanley feels very guilty about not searching for Zero. Why do you think he feels this way? What does this suggest about Stanley? Number 3, what did Stanley's great-grandfather mean when he said he lived for 3 weeks in the desert because he found refuge on God's thumb? And lastly, number 4, how do Stanley and Zero help each other after running away? So these are the questions. Hopefully you have put in some thought, pause when necessary as well. These were chapters 28 through 35. Hopefully it was helpful. We still have 2 more sections of chapters to cover before we end this. Please let me know if you need any other questions answered. You can go ahead and comment and like if it was helpful as well. Thank you.